Good evening, everybody. Hello. Welcome all to the Hustings for this year's Lent term elections. I will be one of your chairs this evening, along with the fabulous Charlie here. We will be just a few pieces of housekeeping before we begin. A note on fire safety: we're not expecting a fire drill this evening. If you hear an alarm, please make your way out of the door on here and down the stairs, and there should be a door right in front of you. In terms of we are live streaming the hustings here, so please do not play the hustings while you are watching here if you're in our live audience, just because there'll be a bit of a delay and it'll just annoy everyone. Candidates and will be filmed throughout this throughout the hustings. And also we have a photographer for Varsity here, so please bear that in mind. But I do not believe the audience should be photographed at any point. Just to quickly go through the format for the evening for each role. The candidates will have an opportunity to give a 1-minute speech on their manifesto and their policies. Then we will go through the pre-submitted questions, and then to finish, we will open to questions from the floor. Are there any questions before we begin? No? Excellent. So the first role is BME officer. So could the candidates come and join me here? Yeah. Please, okay. You'll probably want this.
Thank you.
And feel free to go whenever you're ready.
Okay, hello, my name is Kafeje. I use they, she pronouns. I am a second generation Trinidadian living in London. I am running for your BME officer of the Student Union. I'm incredibly passionate about issues of ethnic minorities in Cambridge. In my few years here, as I'm a second year, I've experienced a lot of concerning situations regarding different people within the university, not understanding different cultural issues and cultural sensitivities, and as well as things like the curriculum being very, very white and Eurocentric, and generally providing an uncomfortable space for people of colour. So my goal is to promote an environment where people of colour can thrive within the university, providing reading lists, access to different community support groups, access to prayer spaces, so that we can feel empowered and like we can thrive and like it's a genuine equal space for everyone to succeed.
Thank you very much. Problem with having your questions at the phone is that phone falls asleep. Anyway, so we have a couple of pre-submitted questions for you. First question is, how do you will you do your best to represent both undergraduates and postgraduates in your role?
So this is something that I think was discussed quite a lot with the ACS committee, African Caribbean Society, for those of you who don't know. And I think it's really important to sort of, as soon as possible, speak and communicate with both undergrads and postgrads. I'm an undergrad, but I know quite a few postgrads already, and I'm happy to create a sort of forum or social media discussion space where I'm receiving questions or comments and kind of opening that dialogue so that we can address these issues, because I know levels of BME students are quite a lot higher with postgrad students, so it's a very big issue for postgrad students.
Okay, thank you very much. And next is, as BME officer, how would you organise and mobilise the broad group of students you represent behind United Goals?
Interesting question. I think is a general larger issue of uniting different racial and ethnic groups. I think it's really valuable to sort of have spaces where different groups can come together and recognise similarities, so whether that's encouraging collaborations between different cultural societies, like maybe Hindu soc and Pak soc, and the ACS do a collaborative, like, I don't know, potluck or something, and we all have conversation and basically facilitating that space where we can communicate more, and then from that build up to work on maybe there's a way we can improve the relations between them in the university, or maybe there's a way that we can improve education about certain minority communities within this whole POC bracket.
Thank you very much. That's all the pre-submitted questions. Would anyone from the floor like to ask a question? Just raise your hand. Nobody? Okay. I can ask you a few questions off the top of my head. If you could achieve one thing in your term, what would it be?
I think... Oh, I've got two ideas now. Okay, one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think my top priority would be to ensure that there are prayer spaces in all department and like university-owned sites, because I think that's quite an important thing for a lot of students. I know there's quite a few like faith-specific spaces, but I think having like a multi-faith space where like some students who would like to have the opportunity to pray or meditate, whatever they need to do in that space.
Okay. And one more thing. Can you give us an example of when you have had to fight for something with a lot of resistance from people in charge?
I guess the most relevant example would be in my local community. I co-founded the BLM group, so BLM Hertfordshire, and we had a protest. It was like a sit-in protest in my local town centre, and we were faced with a lot of backlash. There was maybe like 50 to 80 people coming to protest against us. They brought a lot of weapons and like were generally quite angry and aggressive. And in that situation, I, as like one of the co-founders, I was responsible for sort of liaising with the police in a way that was still respectful to the cause and the reason for the protest, but also ensuring that people were safe. And then following that, I was speaking to the local councillors to sort of ensure that there were better implemented like educational resources for children, so that even if their parents maybe were telling them or teaching them racist things in the home, they were able to access other materials which might help them to be more open-minded and like cooperative with other communities.
Thank you very much. And any other questions? Any questions from the floor? Just the last chance. Just bring the mic over to you now.
I'm not like, I've stopped it, okay. Hiya. Yes, I was just wondering, I know in your manifesto you had something about supporting mental health of BME students. I was just wondering if you could kind of sum up like one kind of maybe like key initiatives that you'd like to do, how you'd like to do that. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, how you support mental health of BME students.
Yeah, so I think I essentially would try and push for the university to provide more BME or counsellors of colour, because I think that's a really important thing that's sometimes overlooked. And it also, in addition to that, I will try and include some sort of POC therapy groups, so that if we can't have like accessible counsellors for everyone, there are spaces where we can come together and intentionally discuss mental health and these sort of issues together.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to ask a question, or is that our only one? I'll take that as a no. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Next up is the Women's Officer candidates. So if you can come and join me.
Remember the closing remarks as well.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. If I forgot that candidates are able to give closing remarks. So, would you like to return and give some closing remarks? Or, sorry, yes, I forgot the format. Many apologies from me. Yes. Yeah. So, if you'd like to give some closing remarks, you're welcome to.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, so generally, as I mentioned in the questions and my opening statement, my main focuses are decolonisation, ensuring mental health and religious provision, which I think is related to mental health, and then also lower down my manifesto, there is a little bit about opening educational opportunities to applicants, because I think it can be quite daunting, and also ensuring that there are accessible spaces for students of colour to communicate with high-profile people of colour, and ensure that we feel empowered and encouraged to aspire to whatever we want to do. So yeah, if that's what you're interested in, then consider voting for me.
Okay. Now it's actually the women's officer's turn. Yes.
Before we do this, you need to do the Ron as a candidate.
Oh yes. Just to, as a reminder, as with every other election tonight, Ron is a candidate. If you vote for this candidate instead of actual people, we will rerun the election with a new selection of candidates. Yes, okay. So next off is for the role of women's officer. Sorry, what are your names?
I'm Asosa. Hi.
I'm Marina.
Okay. So Asosa, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, my name is Asosa. I'm a postgrad studying gender studies, running to be the next women's officer. I'll just run through this quickly. So I've been organising in student spaces for the past 3 years, and I've learned so much that I'm really eager to bring to this role. In my final year of my undergraduate degree, I was part of Warwick Anti-Racism Society, Warwick Anti-Sexism Society, and I was also the Environment Ethics Officer in my students' union. And now this kind of made a lot of my organising quite sporadic, because I was doing a lot of different things. But I think that was one of the biggest strengths of what I did, and one of the biggest strengths I'll bring into this role, because we don't live single issue lives as women and people of marginalised genders. So many things affect us. Anyway, so my manifesto points can really be summed up as: we deserve better and we deserve more. We deserve to be paid, valued and supported, postgrads, student sex workers, and those of us who are affected by the gendered, racialised and class attainment gap. We deserve better. Trans and non-binary students, they deserve more than a gender expression fund. They deserve an accessible transition fund that actually covers their transition costs at Cambridge. We also deserve love. So when I was writing this point on my manifesto, all I could think about was Bell Hooks, may she rest in peace. And she writes that love is a combination of care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect and trust. And this isn't a type of love that the university gives to us, but it's also a type of love that we don't always give to each other. As Women's Officer, however, one of my main aims will be fostering a strong sense of community among people of marginalised genders in Cambridge. This isn't like we're all in a group chat, like institutionally linked type of community type of sense, but like we show up for each other at the pickets, at protests. We hold space for each other in book clubs. We learn from each other. We organise together in community kitchens and community gardens. And we learn from each other. Practically, this looks like a physical space in the new SU building that is dedicated, resourced and decorated by us, for us. Sorry, am I running out of time? No, okay, I'll carry on. No, I am.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll sum up really quickly. Basically, we should plug into ourselves and we should plug into each other. We should learn and educate from each other on so many different things, because as I said at the beginning, we don't live single issue lives. We can't do single issue organising, and I won't be a single issue women's officer. In this way, I hope to be able to represent all women and people of marginalised genders in a radical, community-based, intersectional way.
Hi, I'm Marina. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running to be the next women's officer because I love this university and I love all the people in it, but I think this university is really letting its students down, and particularly its students who are of marginalised genders. I've been at this uni for 3 years now, and I've seen firsthand how this affects us. I've seen the archaic, opaque complaint systems which take months and months to get through, and colleges aren't even held accountable to that. Colleges can have kind of conflicts of interest. They can have staff who aren't even trained to deal with complaints, taking the first role for victims. I've seen female students 8% less likely to get first than their male peers, and it's only more compounded if you consider marginalised ethnicities. I've seen supervisors who are on short-term contracts, which means they can't even access sick pay or maternity pay. And I think everywhere you look, every hurdle this university throws at us, it affects women and marginalised genders more, and within that it affects queer women, disabled women and women of colour even more. It doesn't have to be like this, and I really believe this uni can change. And I know the women's officer role is obviously only for a year, but I really think I would try my best to actually make some changes in this space. And I know I will fight my hardest for that. So yeah, vote for me if you want a university that's safe and inclusive and just for everyone.
Thank you very much to both of you. First pre-submitted question I have is, aside from what's on your manifesto, what will you do to make Cambridge and WMCAM inclusive and welcoming for trans women and non-binary people who identify as part of the campaign? Should we start with Marina this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's so important to emphasise that even though it's still called Women's Officer, the campaign is for anyone of the marginalised gender who wants to identify with the campaign, and we need to proactively welcome trans women and non-binary people into the campaign. Whether that's through specific meetups for non-binary people, which I'm non-binary myself, I'd be interested in leading that sort of thing. Talking to trans women about how to make them feel more safe and included, because feminist spaces can sometimes be difficult for that, but I think at Cambridge we really can provide that safe space for them. And yeah, just being as opening and inclusive as possible and welcoming anyone who feels that they want to be part of this campaign, because they are part of this campaign.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Oh, sure. Aside from what's on your manifestos, what will you do to make Cambridge and WMCAM inclusive and welcoming for trans women and non-binary people who identify as part of the campaign?
That is a really good question. It is a bit of a big question, so I'll break it into two chunks. I think for Cambridge specifically, the rise of transphobia and TERFism around the city, Jordan Peterson spoke at the union, that's kind of insane. And the white rose stickers that have been appearing up and stuff like that. I think in order to make the city safer, we almost have to plug into some of the local organising groups based in the city and work with them on tackling TERFism and transphobia. In terms of the women's campaign, I think part of that will be linking those two together and making the women's campaign more coordinated and focused on tackling TERFism and transphobia in the city of Cambridge. But it's also a national and to a certain extent international problem as well. So kind of plugging WomenCam and the things that we're doing in Cambridge into a more national context through organisations like Sisters and Cuts and other organisations like that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next, if you could only have one priority as Women's Officer, what would it be and why?
I think it would be fostering a real sense of community. That's why one of my manifesto points is creating a liberation room in the new SU building. And if I could do one thing, it would be to have that set up and resourced and have it be an actual place where people meet and people can meet each other and meet new people, and so that even after I go, that sense of community is still there, that kind of legacy remains.
I think it's tough because I'd like to be able to say something a bit nicer, but I really don't think we can kind of aim for love and community until we've got really basic safety things done, which is why I think overhauling the complaint system and just how the university approaches issues of harassment and assault is the first thing that needs to be done. It's kind of a hierarchy of needs, right? It's the bottom of the pyramid. So I think encouraging more preventative measures on that, as well as making it more welfare-centred for people who go through complaints purposes, would probably be my priority. And I also think the benefit of that is it's not only then going to benefit women and marginalised genders, that the same complaints process is used for people of any marginalised identity. So hopefully those changes could also help queer people or people of colour. So I think that's why that would be my main priority.
Thank you very much. We'll now take questions from the floor. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? No? I have one spare question to go if nobody else would like to ask one. Okay. Yes, so this will be the same one we asked previously. How will you represent both undergraduates and postgraduates?
I think a really big thing I want to focus on is student-staff solidarity. I've been on picket lines these past few weeks, and meeting loads of staff has been amazing, and I think we really need to stand by them. And staff obviously includes postgraduate students, a lot of whom supervise, and a lot of whom are women. And the issues that affect postgraduate supervisors, such as casualisation and overwork, so significantly impact female supervisors more, that I think that's going to be a really important focus of what I want to do. And I think encouraging and educating students on why that matters to them, and like just how bad it is, because some people just don't know how awful conditions are for supervisors. So I think that's going to be the best way I represent postgraduate students, beyond kind of having the postgrad rep in the women's campaign and like listening to them in forum.
Well, as a postgraduate myself, I arrived in Cambridge in September and was really confused as to how some of the systems in the SU and stuff like that worked. And I think the first place that I went to try and figure all of that out was my MCR, but my MCR was also quite confused. So I think one of the things that I would like to focus on is like really connecting the MCRs to each other and also to the Students' Union, and making sure, because a lot of times complaints are raised, like I raised all of my complaints through my MCR and didn't understand that I could take them to the SU or to the university, and just making sure that that system is like properly protected, and that the SU and the MCRs like work together in those types of things.
Thank you very much. Last chance for any questions from the floor, and then we'll go to closing remarks. Okay, I think we'll go for closing remarks then. Start with, sorry, what was his name again?
Emma Sosa.
Emma Sosa, sorry.
My closing remarks are that I've learned so much about Cambridge on the pickets, at protests in my college. And I can confidently say that we deserve better and we deserve more. We deserve stress-free nights out, from pre-drinks to the club to our walks home. We deserve nurturing spaces where we can learn from and listen to each other. Postgrads deserve better pay. Student sex workers deserve better support. Trans and non-binary students deserve better support. And I'm so excited to bring my experience to this role, demanding what we deserve.
Hey. On the women's campaign, when I was campaigning for Safe Nights Out, I sat in Lola's at 11 a.m. with the bar manager and talked to him about what I thought students needed from their club to make things more safe. And honestly, I think once you've done that, you can do pretty much anything. So I just really am passionate about all these issues. I really want to bring so much to the student union and so much for the students, because we do deserve more. And I think I have the experience on women's campaign and the LGBT campaign and in my college JCR, and I have the drive to make these changes happen. So a vote for me would be really appreciated, and I'll do my absolute best to make this place better for us all.
Thank you very much to you both. Next up is the Disabled Students Officer. Just as a reminder, once again, Ron is also a candidate in this election. If you vote for Ron, then instead of either of these candidates taking the role, we will reopen nominations for alternatives. So as I was saying, next is the Disabled Students Officer. Please sit down. Bring it in whenever you feel ready.
So hi, I'm Elia. I use they, them pronouns, and I am running to be the Disabled Students Officer. Should I go through my opening? Yeah. Cool. So I feel like many disabled students at this university, when I joined, the main reason I got involved in disability activism was because of my own bad experiences, and this university is, as great as it can be completely awful for disabled students. There are so many issues around accessibility, issues around kind of the general treatment about disabled students, and personally I think there is so much that can be done to improve it. And I know personally, I think so there are so many ways that we can improve it, for example, by supporting the mental health of disabled students a lot better, as, for example, one of the most difficult things about being a disabled student is kind of the burden, like the administrative burden that disabled students face, and supporting their mental health would be a lot easier for students, and also kind of making sure the DRC is efficient as well as well funded, and also ensuring, which is something that's really close to my heart, is ensuring that complaints and fitness study procedures are not used punitively and are also accessible and transparent. But generally there are so many issues in this university for disabled students, and I want to try my hardest to basically overcome them and to make this university generally a better place.
Thank you very much. Pre-submitted questions. If you could achieve only one thing on your manifesto, what would it be and why?
This is quite a hard question. As I said, there are so many different things that need to change. But I think one thing I think that affects not only disabled students but all students at this university is, again, kind of what the women's officer candidates were saying, are kind of those complaints and fitness study procedures. I think they're not transparent, they're not accessible, they're confusing, which I know myself, and there are so many different versions across the university. If you're a disabled student that wants to make a complaint for any sort of reason, it's going to be complicated, as well as that, it's long, and it requires so much of your energy and your time, which again is something that is so prevalent in kind of most processes in this university. They are long and they are long-winded. So I think, again, focusing on that complaints procedure, that's kind of my main thing, but I think that extends to a lot of what I want to do anyways. And again, what I've kind of combined together is also the fitness to study procedure. That's something that, again, is long-winded, and it's also really punitive, and it harms disabled students the most. It's basically attacks them for being ill a lot of the time without considering what the disabled student actually needs to support them. And I feel like tackling things like that, which are at their core ableist and harmful, can hopefully then create at least more of a culture where we can, again, not treat disabled students like they are, you can throw them away. And I feel like that's just one of the first steps to that.
Thank you very much. Next is, how will you work with the Disabled Students Campaign to further your own aims and support their work?
I've been on the Disabled Students Campaign for the last few years I've been BME rep twice, and I think firstly, the DSC forum is a great way to engage with the campaign. It's, again, where a lot of kind of campaigning work gets done, and it's where, for example, a lot of issues are raised, and I think that, for one, and making sure those are frequent and accessible to all disabled students. So, for example, whether that we've been doing them online and sort of keeping that format, because I know for me personally, online things can be really helpful, though obviously that's not for everyone. And so making sure that there are ways to make sure they are accessible to all, so whether that's by doing hybrid meetings, basically just to get kind of attendance, and so we can hear everyone's points of views and everyone's thoughts on the issues and many issues that occur in this university. And also, I think generally listening to what the DSC has to say. I feel like the DSC generally has a lot of really engaged kind of people that really care about kind of disability activism within the university, who all bring really great perspectives. So making sure to listen to their perspectives and bring that back both to the SU and to, for example, other university committees, of which I know there are several, and to just make sure that there's kind of a two-way interaction, so also that they know, the DSC know what I'm doing, and that I can kind of take what they're doing back to wider bodies within the university, and hopefully that will make for good engagement, I think.
Great. Are there any questions from the floor? All very quiet this evening. Well then, I'll give you one more question that I've asked the previous two for the previous two roles. How will you best represent both undergraduates and postgraduates?
So again, I think for one, again, one of the main ways that like communication takes place within kind of disability forums is through forums. So making sure, I think not only, for example, a lot of, you know, advertising forums is done, for example, on Facebook, and I feel like moving like that to, I feel like, a wider range of platforms, as I feel like as things change, but also I think engaging or trying to engage more with both JCRs and MCRs, as I feel like JCRs and MCRs are basically, at least what I've found in like my other campaigns, they know what's going on, they know, again, also what their students, most of the time, are like what their students are facing, so making sure to engage with them as best as possible is a really good way to kind of get the views of both JCRs and MCRs and undergraduate and postgraduate students. And also I think in general, obviously the DSC has different reps on it, so making sure to engage, for example, with the postgraduate reps, and I think like there would be a postgraduate chair, and making sure to engage with those as best as possible and listen to their views. And also just generally kind of, again, going back to forums, making sure to communicate directly with students, I feel like is the best way to represent students, because if you know what they're thinking and their points of views, that's the best way that you can then go ahead and represent them.
Thank you very much. One last chance for questions on the floor. No. Okay. Closing remarks, and then
hopefully this will be slightly more coherent than my intro remarks. But yeah, so I want to be your disabled students officer. I know there are so many issues in this university that both directly and indirectly affect disabled students. Be it kind of, again, the administrative burden, or being attacked with awful procedures, or even just, for example, the lack of transport links to some of the colleges. And I know personally that the amount of times I've taken the U bus to go to like appointments, it's a necessity. And I want to fight for these, and will fight for these, and to make sure that this university can be as good as possible for disabled students, and to make sure that we can thrive at this university instead of just surviving, or sometimes not even that. I think that's
once again, I reminded that Ron is a candidate. If you vote for Ron, then we will reopen nominations. We're going to take a short break, I think 5 minutes? 15 minutes, sorry. And after which Charlie will take over. So I will see you all in 15 minutes.